order. I'd like to welcome everyone to this afternoon's hearing. Today we will hear from the personnel chiefs from the department and the 4 military services to discuss what they are doing to improve and modernize military personnel policy to sustain the all-volunteer force. The military personnel policy does not just involve military personnel, it also involves the family. We ask service members and their families to make sacrifices for our nation. When they bravely step up to this task, we must only ask them to sacrifice when it's necessary for our national security, not when it's required by outdated or short-sighted personnel policies. Our job is to recruit and retain service members who will allow the U.S. military to fight and win future challenges. A modern personnel system is a crucial tool in that effort. I spent 5 days last month visiting 5 different military installations, talking to leadership, service members, and their spouses, so I could learn firsthand what the issues are facing our service members and families. These codels will continue, and I invite my colleagues on the committee to join me. There were 4 major issues that stood out. One was location of assignment and its impact on school-age children, especially high school age, employment for spouses who have professional careers, woefully inadequate child care slots, and the need for more resources for sexual assault and domestic violence for service members and spouses. The demographics of service members have changed. More of our talented service members have talented spouses who want their own careers, want to contribute to the financial success of the family, and are starting families early in their careers. We have a force of volunteers that deserve recruiting and retention policies that adapt with the times, not inflexible bureaucratic cultures that demand conformity without offering new solutions. Military families are now making decisions not only based on military members' career progression, but on the whole family's future. A small number of Americans serve in our armed forces, and they have growing expectations. Their expectations are merited, and we must meet and exceed them. The competition for the limited talent is fierce. The department and the services have a great amount of flexibility in determining who is qualified to serve, and must continue to look at ways to open the aperture to gain access to talent. We have a responsibility to take these problems seriously and not chalk up our system's shortcomings to the entitled needs and misplaced expectations of a new generation. Personnel policy must be shaped to respond to those currently serving, not those who commissioned during the Cold War. It is incumbent upon leadership in DOD and Congress to listen to and learn from those we serve, as we must make greater use of modern data gathering and survey techniques to make human resources decisions like a modern corporation. I believe the services need to think creatively and beyond their current cultures about how to manage people. The central question for today is, how are the military services adapting to recruit, retain, and manage high-quality talent to meet the needs of our modern military? I'm interested to hear from our witnesses and how they gather information on what their service members value, how does that translate to policy, and what are each of you doing to incorporate the family into policies governing the career management process. Before we introduce the first panel, let me offer Ranking Member Kelly an opportunity to make his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Spear, and I wish to welcome our witnesses to today's hearing. I also want to congratulate Vice Admiral Burke on his nomination as the next Vice Chief of Naval Operations. We cannot overstate the central role that our service members play in making the United States the most lethal military in the world. This strategic advantage is due in large part to the high accession and retention standards that the military services have established and continue to maintain. However, in this extremely strong economy with a record low unemployment rates and a low propensity to serve among our young people, it is not surprising that the pool of eligible applicants is extremely small. Given the challenging recruiting environment, it is crucial that the services leverage every tool available to understand what motivates qualified individuals to serve in the military and stay. In addition, once qualified applicants are recruited into the military, it's essential that the services efficiently and effectively identify and retain the most talented of those service members. To that end, Congress has given significant additional authorities to the Defense Department to ensure that they have the flexibility to recruit and retain a talented, competitive, and lethal force. However, before making additional changes to personnel management, we need to clearly understand the problem. Our previous hearing on the topic with outside experts reinforced the premise that we need to clearly understand why service members are electing to get out of the military and to understand what would have kept them in the service. The Defense Department already has much of the data necessary to answer these questions, but I remain concerned that the Department is not maximizing their use of this information in order to make informed policy decisions. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about the current efforts to effectively retain qualified service members. Specifically, what data do the services use to understand what motivates service members to remain in the service? In addition, I'm interested to hear what additional policy changes the services have made to the evaluation system, promotion system, and assignment system to identify and retain talent. I'm also interested to understand this year's in-strength requests and what those numbers will buy us in terms of readiness. Will the requested in-strength increases simply round down existing units, or will it allow the services to populate additional units or platforms? I'm interested to hear about the services goals for in-strength increases over the next 5 years. Finally, I believe family services are directly related to retention. The old adage is true: you recruit the soldier, but you retain the family. I'm particularly concerned about the severe shortage of quality military child care. Recent statistics we've received from the Department reveal that there are several installations where the average wait time for on-installation child care is in excess of 180 days. This is problematic not just for working family, but also for spouses who are hoping to look for work. If they have limited access to child care, how can they seek employment? This is unacceptable, and I would like to know what the services are doing to ensure families are receiving the support they need, including meaningful access to child care. Once again, I want to thank our witnesses and our chairperson for being here today and for their decades of service, and I yield back, Chair.
Thank you, Ranking Member Kelly. Each witness will have the opportunity to present his or her testimony, and each member will have an opportunity to question the witnesses for 5 minutes. We respectfully ask the witnesses to summarize their testimony in 5 minutes or less. Your written comments and statements will be made part of the hearing record. Let's welcome our panel. First, the Honorable James Stewart, performing the duties of the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness at the Department of Defense. Welcome. Lieutenant General Thomas Seamans, Deputy Chief of Staff for United States Army. Vice Admiral Robert Burke, Chief of Naval Personnel, United States Navy, and I too would like to recognize that this will be Admiral Burke's last opportunity to testify before our subcommittee in this capacity. Congratulations on your nomination to be Vice Chief of Naval Operations. Next, we will hear from Lieutenant General Brian Kelly, Deputy Chief of Staff for Manpower, Personnel, and Services in the United States Air Force. And finally, Lieutenant General Michael Rocco, Deputy Commandant for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, United States Marine Corps. With that, Secretary Stewart, you may begin with your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Kelly, distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to appear here before you today to discuss how the Department of Defense recruits, retains, and manages our high-quality talent to meet the needs of our nation. The Department is committed to effective total force management, leveraging active and reserve military forces, civilian personnel, and contractors. To be effective, this effort must be long-term in scope and vision and must always be focused on our service members who are at the tip of the spear. The military services have sustained the all-volunteer force by recruiting the best and brightest from across the nation. The services are on track to achieve their recruiting missions this year, but they continue to face an ever-changing recruiting environment. A robust economy, low unemployment, and significant competition from the civilian sector have highlighted and tightened today's recruiting environment. Today, only 29% of our American youth are eligible for military service without a waiver, and only 2% are eligible, high quality, and propense to serve. So the Department is employing new and innovative tools to attract this group. To reach a more technologically savvy generation, the Department is leveraging social media and other relevant technologies. we have launched an integrated digital marketing campaign targeting not only young people, but those who influence them the most, those parents, teachers, coaches, and other people in their lives who play a key role in the decision to join the military. Our Joint Advertising, Market Research, and Studies program, or JAMMers folks, have produced several 30-second commercial spots that appeal to all segments of our society, while utilizing artificial intelligence to analyze information, allowing us to reach audiences when they will be most receptive to DOD messaging. The Department and military services have varied outreach and marketing efforts to reach the widest audience, including specific activities targeted to reach talented women and minorities, because we rely on diverse backgrounds and perspectives to address the complex challenges facing our nation today. In order to manage this diverse all-volunteer force, we appreciate the officer management authorities you provided in fiscal year 2019 National Defense Authorization Act. These authorities give military services new and flexible tools in the management and retention of the officer corps. And speaking of retention, military services are each exhibiting strong retention in the aggregate, and they expect to meet or exceed retention goals this year. In fact, the Army and the Air Force are seeing retention rates of 90% or more, rates that have not been evidenced in decades. Achieving and maintaining these retention rates is only possible if you take care of the member and their family. We like to say that you recruit the member, but to retain the family. We know that a commitment to the military often entails sacrifices. So we're making every effort to support our military families in ways that recognize and relieve the challenges that come with the military way of life. Authorities you granted in fiscal year 2018 National Defense Authorization Act, allowing families to occupy 2 sets of quarters in different locations while retaining the higher basic allowance for housing, eases the burdens and disruptions of PCS moves and allows for more stability for the members, especially with those children in schools or for spouses with jobs. Concerning spouses, we know that 24% of military spouses are unemployed or underemployed. Supporting military spouses in their employment leads to family readiness and financial stability. That's why career counseling, finding employment opportunities, and supporting our highly successful scholarship program, My Career Advancement Account, are important. Also important is occupational license portability, which will allow spouses to transfer professional licenses and credentials from state to state. The Department of Defense's State Liaison Office has successfully worked with the states to streamline license transfer processing and continues to work with interagency and state partners to expedite or exempt professional licensing requirements for military spouses. Quality child care is extremely important for military families as well. The Department is working hard to provide high-quality, affordable child care to our service members. We recognize the importance and impact on family readiness and are committed to meeting the increased demand for child care services. Our rollout of militarychildcare.com allows families to register for child care in advance of a move or before the new addition of a child to a family. Constructing new and refurbishing existing facilities, along with streamlining human capital practices, will facilitate the Department's ability to meet our service members' child care needs. Thank you for the opportunity to testify for you today and for your dedication and support that you've given to the Department. I'm eager to continue our work together to ensure that we remain the most powerful fighting force in the world while sustaining and empowering military families who support our men and women in uniform. Thank you.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Kelly, distinguished members of the committee, I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today on behalf of the women and men of the United States Army. I've submitted a statement for the record, but I'd like to highlight a few of the points now. The Army's greatest strength is our people, the intelligent, adaptable, professional soldiers, civilians, and families who sacrifice so much for our nation. We take care of our people by ensuring that our personnel policies are relevant, compassionate, and focused on readiness. Manning is truly the keystone in the archway of readiness and is vital to our Army's ability to fight and win our nation's wars. To maintain readiness and to shape the future Army, we must recruit diverse, resilient individuals of high character to fully man our formations while obtaining sustainable growth and maintaining quality standards. Further, we must recruit in a competitive market. The Army must also continue to retain the most qualified and talented soldiers, non-commissioned officers, commissioned officers, and civilians with the experience and skills to meet our future needs. Retention of the family is just as important as retention of the soldier. Thanks to you, I'd like to echo the comments of Mr. Stewart for the work you did on the 2018 NDA. We now have in place the authority to reimburse spouses for licensing and credentialing when they change stations based on their soldiers' move. Taking care of families remains our top priority. Thanks to your efforts in the 2018 NDA, we're taking steps to improve the quality of our life programs across our installations. These areas include enhancements for our dependents' educations, child care programs, hiring authorities, as well as improvements to family support and readiness. Thank you for the authorities as well in the 2019 NDA, which provided us greater flexibility in our personnel management. We're beginning to use the authorities granted to help shape the future talent-based system. As such, we're transforming our business practices and developing innovations to ensure we provide a force that is optimized. We have created a marketplace of officers where officers and units meet, find optimal ways to match talent, personal and professional goals while enhancing readiness. The Army is undertaking a comprehensive reform of our officer personnel management system to ensure we match the knowledge, skills, and behaviors of each soldier, getting them into the right position. The Army is moving away from an industrial-age personnel distribution system to an information-age market-based model. The new system will deliberately manage our soldiers based on optimized placement in positions that capitalize on their unique talents. The Army remains committed to giving all soldiers who can meet the standards of a military occupational specialty the opportunity to serve. We've successfully assessed and transferred more than 1,000 women into previously closed occupations of infantry, armor, and field artillery. Department of the Army civilians are an integral partner in our efforts to become more lethal, enhancing our capability and capacity, and ensuring critical support to our soldiers and families. We must continue to size our civilian workforce to meet the current and future demands. The Integrated Pay and Personnel System Army, IPSA, is modernizing and transforming our human resources processes as I speak to change how the Army manages our most important asset, our people. We recently completed a very successful test of IPSA with the Pennsylvania Army National Guard. The system is now live in Virginia and will soon be live in D.C. and Maryland National Guard. This year, we will field the system across all our Army National Guard formations. To ensure that we're organizationally ready for combat, we must sustain the personnel readiness of our soldiers. The Army is improving personnel readiness by strengthening our soldiers, improving resiliency skills, and fostering a culture of trust, fitness, and deployability. We believe these actions will enhance unit readiness, cohesion, and reduce the number of non-deployable soldiers. In addition to taking care of soldiers and their families while they're in the Army, we are committed to ensuring their successful transition as they prepare for life after the service. Ultimately, we want soldiers to properly transition to productive veterans of character, integrity, and service as they return to their communities. Our Army is the most formidable ground combat force on the earth because of the courage and commitment of our soldiers, civilians, veterans, and family members who serve our nation. People are the Army. These men and women who serve our nation, both in uniform and out, along with their families, are our most important asset. For the Army to be ready, our soldiers and families must also be ready. Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Kelly, distinguished members of the committee, I thank you for your generous and unwavering support of our outstanding soldiers and civilians and their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Admiral Burke.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Kelly, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and update you on your Navy's personnel programs. We continue to grow the Navy's manpower commensurate with the force structure for the Navy the nation needs. We're simultaneously working to restore full manning to our existing fleet. This year, we will grow the Navy by 7,500 people and another 5,100 next year. Our fleet wholeness continues to improve, as evidenced by steady progress in improving fleet manning and closing gaps at sea, even as we're growing the Navy at this aggressive pace. We still have work to do, and our success is directly tied to our collective commitment to consistent and full funding. Finding the right people is as important as making the numbers. The war for talent, as you've heard already, is real, and the competition is increasing. We continue to make our overall recruiting goals the highest in decades, mostly due to our recruiting transformation efforts, innovative use of social media, and by shifting our Forged by the Sea advertising campaign predominantly to the digital market. A combination of our Sailor 2025 programs, surgical use of retention bonuses, which have been aided by predictive analytics, and other policy levers resulted in 2018 showing the largest enlisted retention improvements in a decade. This is critical as it has allowed us to establish the deep bench of experienced journeymen we're going to need to develop that next generation of masters. Despite overall improvements in retention, we continue to face challenges in the usual critical areas. Our Sailor 2025 initiatives continue to expand and get high marks from our sailors. This program will be a critical force multiplier going forward. The underlying transparency and the flexibility it provides directly and positively impacts our sailors' stay Navy decision. We greatly appreciated the increased DOTMA flexibility provided in the FY19 National Defense Authorization Act, and we are already putting each of the new authorities to work, and we look forward to reporting our successes to you in the near future. But as important as the programs themselves is the manner in which we deliver our personnel services. It's been said several times already today, and it's true, you recruit the sailor, but you retain the family. And what we ask of our sailors and their families is tremendous. But if we do a poor job of delivering basic services to them, like pay and travel claim liquidation, or we pile additional financial stress onto an already stressful event like a move because of our unimaginative processes, that sends a signal to our sailors and families that we just don't care. Our customer service is clearly a key retention driver. So we're on a path to deliver personnel services in a modern, simple, one-stop shopping, mobile device-enabled manner with friendly, reliable call centers available 24/7 to help with the complex issues. That's what our sailors expect and deserve. And yes, it's IT systems to a degree, but more importantly, it's better, smarter, sailor-centric processes and a culture of customer service. So this past September, we launched My Navy Career Center, delivering enhanced 24/7 personnel pay and training customer service, just like a modern banking or insurance call center. My Navy Portal is our new online one-stop personnel shop, and it offers a multitude of self-service options. In January, we began the move to My Navy Portal Mobile, piloting use of commercial cloud systems without the use of allowing sailors to access these systems without the use of their common access card. By the end of this calendar year, our sailors will be doing most personnel business from their smartphones, and even the admin associated with PCS moves, one of the most frustrating evolutions all of us in uniform do, will be an afterthought so that families can concentrate on what matters most. The other angle that we're tackling is the changing nature of our workforce. 67% of our officers and over half of our enlisted sailors are married, and many of them are dual professional couples. We have to address that reality if we're going to retain the family, and we launched multiple efforts within our Sailor 2025 portfolio to start to get after that. We have challenges that remain, and we still have a great deal of work to get to where we need to be if we're going to be truly competitive, but we're on a good path. And I'd like to close by saying thank you for your support of these efforts and for your unwavering commitment to the men and women in the United States Navy and their families. I look forward to continuing our partnership, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma Burke. Next, Lieutenant General Kelly.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Kelly, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you to talk about our airmen, active, guard, reserve, and civilian. America's airmen, your airmen, remain always there as part of the joint team, providing global vigilance, reach, and power in defense of the nation. The Air Force's top priority is to build a lethal and ready Air Force capable of executing the National Defense Strategy assigned missions. At its core, building a lethal and ready Air Force is about people, making our airmen and their families our most important asset. We therefore thank you for focusing this hearing on how we manage, recruit, take care of, and retain our airmen and families, particularly so to meet the needs of a modern military. We greatly appreciate your support that you provided in the FY19 National Defense Authorization Act for continued end-strength growth to 690,500 total force airmen. This growth is accelerating our readiness recovery and will provide lethal airmen to protect and defend our nation. This past year, we focused the resources you provided on our frontline pacing units, the 204 operational squadrons required in the opening days of a peer fight. Prioritizing the resources you provided has allowed more than 90% of the lead packages to be ready to fight tonight, with 80% of the complete pacing units fully ready by the end of fiscal year 20, 6 years faster than originally projected. The FY20 requested growth to 700,000 total force airmen continues our readiness recovery, augments existing capacity in our space and cyber mission areas, and provides the initial maintenance and operational manpower needed for the KC-46, F-35, and B-21. Despite an increasingly competitive market for talent, our active duty, reserve, and Air National Guard are all on track to meet our overall FY19 recruiting goals. However, with an understanding of the keen competition for talent, the Air Force has recently established a total force recruiting service effort responsible for recruiting and coordinating efforts across all three components. As part of this effort, we recently assigned a one-star reserve general officer as the deputy commander of the Air Force Recruiting Service. We have also established two focused recruiting entities, one whose focus is to outreach to youth to increase awareness around opportunities within our underrepresented diverse populations, and the second whose job is to specifically scout, recruit, and prepare airmen for special warfare career fields. Both entities have shown promise during this year. This tough recruiting market, coupled with the high investments we make in training, places an even greater value on retaining our airmen and our families. We therefore appreciate the Congress's support of special and incentive pays, which are a critical component to complement our non-monetary retention incentives. The FY19 budget included $1.2 billion for special and incentive pays, allowing the Air Force to retain highly skilled airmen. Our overall retention picture is positive, although we have acute pockets where we're particularly stressed, including among our aviators. The Air Force ended fiscal year 18 with a total force pilot shortage of approximately 2,000 pilots, with slightly more than half of that shortfall within our fighter inventory. We appreciate the Congress' support for increasing the pilot annual cap and monthly incentive pay levels, which we believe had a mildly positive impact this past year. Overall, we find non-monetary programs even more important to retention and therefore remain focused on improving the quality of life and quality of service of our airmen and their families. Responding to survey data from members and spouses, we added flexibility into the officer assignment process by leveraging technology through our new Talent Marketplace assignment matching system. We believe the increased transparency and improved member input will have a positive retention influence. We are expanding this system toward our enlisted force and testing it to identify airmen for year-long deployments. We're also executing family moves in accordance with the Family Stability Act and are utilizing high school deferments to provide some relief from the burdens of frequent moves to our airmen and families. The Air Force is also committed to transforming the way we develop, promote, and retain our officer corps. We thank the Congress for the increased development authorities received this past year and are utilizing early promotion and constructive credit already to fill gaps in our inventory. With your help, we also increased support to airmen and families for resiliency. We increased funding for child and youth programs by $40 million, added 119 civilian child care positions, increased offsets to support the 4,500 children who annually use off-base providers, and funded youth resilience camps. We also know spouse employment is essential to family retention. Earlier this week, our Assistant Secretary for Manpower and Reserve Affairs signed out our policy implementing license reimbursement associated with permanent change of station for our spouses. The Air Force also remains committed to continued work in granting reciprocal licensing between states and adding increased employment flexibilities for our overseas spouses. Chairman Spear, Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Kelly, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you and represent our incredible airmen and their families. Your airmen stand ready and fully understand the responsibilities to the joint force in the nation. I'm honored to be here alongside my colleagues, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, General Kelly. Now we'll hear from General Rocco.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Kelly, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the high-quality Marines who make up the Corps. Your Marines are the foundation of the Marine Corps. They are smart, resilient, fit, disciplined, and able to overcome adversity. Recruiting and retaining these high-quality women and men is my #1 priority. This year, the Corps will once again meet our recruiting mission, while at the same time exceeding all quality goals. Over 99% of our recruits are in the top education tier. This success would not be possible without adequate funding for advertising, and I thank you for your support in this effort. The Corps is also on pace to meet our retention goals this year. However, this is a continuous challenge because of the strong civilian job market. This is particularly true for cyber, intelligence, aviators, and many of the other critical high-tech occupations. To be good stewards of the money you provide us, we narrowly target our incentive pays and bonuses to these occupations. These bonuses are vital to our retention effort, and we appreciate your continued support for them. To improve recruiting and retention, we're in the midst of executing a new survey, an AI-focused talent management line of effort. The goal of this effort is to utilize data to better determine and predict retention and performance behaviors. We believe this effort will bear fruit in the near future. The Marine Corps is an objective, standards-based organization. We want the best Marines, female and male, and have refocused and refined our outreach to ensure we bring awareness of what it means to be a Marine to a broader audience. This has paid dividends. 5 years ago, the Marine Corps was 7.3% female. We are now 8.8%. In fiscal year 18, female accessions were over 10% of the population, and we are on that same trajectory this year. Additionally, females are represented in all previously restricted occupational fields. We need the best our nation offers, and we are getting them. We appreciate the recent officer management authorities that you provided in the fiscal year 19 NDAA. They seek to help modernize how we manage our Marines with the goal of recruiting and retaining the highest quality talent. Increasingly, warfighting is becoming more sophisticated, technical, and complex. Cyber operations, information and electronic warfare, enhanced command and control, and intelligence are examples of critical skills we will need for the future fight. We're in the process of implementing lineal list flexibility based on merit for our officer corps for many promotion boards scheduled to occur in 2019. We believe that allowing the promotion board the discretion to reorder by merit will reward those high-quality officers who demonstrate sustained superior performance. The adage that we recruit the Marine but retain the family was never more true than today. To this end, we are focusing significant effort on helping our Marine spouses gain further education and obtain and maintain employment. We are finalizing our policy to provide up to $500 towards licensing and certification costs when a Marine spouse moves to another state. I am proud to represent the men and women of character, the few, the proud, who have taken up the challenge of being a Marine. By keeping unwavering focus on our Marines and the spouses and families who support them, we can continue to keep faith with the honor, courage, and commitment they have so freely given. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, General Rocco. First of all, let me just say how impressed I am that you have recognized the importance of the family in addition to the service member. And I think that bodes well as we attempt to retain service members over the long term. Let me start with a lightning round of questions. I'm going to ask each of the services the same questions, if you could just go down the line. First question I have is, what is your waiting list for childcare, and how long is the wait for each of you?
Madam Chairman, it varies from location to location. In some cases, it is, as was cited earlier, over 100 days in places like Hawaii, where the cost of living is a little higher and it's harder to attract people. In some cases, it's very nominal wait list, depending on the workforce as well as the space.
Well, that's actually not a great answer. So I'd like for you to give me something that's more data-driven. When we were at, at Fort Bragg and meeting with the spouses, that was a serious complaint that they had to wait over a year in some cases. So I think we need granular data from each of you if you don't have it. Admiral Burke?
Yes, ma'am. We have just over 8,000 personnel on wait list right now. About 2,000 of them are in excess of 180 days, just over 6 months there. And we continue to work on means to expand our capacity.
Okay. General Kelly.
Chairwoman, I'll take the discussion, as you said, for more granular data to provide you, but what I'll provide to you now is General Seaman said, it varies by bases. We have some bases with absolutely no waiting list, and we have others who are upwards of 140 days. And those are the key areas would be Langley Air Force Base, for sure, Joint Base, Elmendorf-Richardson, Alaska, as two that come to mind, which are also problematic in that there's not a lot of off-base child care available at those locations as well.
Okay. Yes.
Chairwoman Spears, for the Marine Corps, we have 800 gaps, just over 800 gaps in child care. Those are primarily located at Camp Pendleton, Hawaii, and Quantico. The wait list is about, on average, for those three bases, 6 months. And any of the other bases, we don't have a problem. And the issue is not about space. It is about having qualified workers, the licensing, the high turnover. So we have an area like Camp Pendleton, Southern California. They come on, they get licensed. It takes a little bit of time. They get their license, they get their credentials. They're paid at the rate that we can pay them. And then because they're credentialed in such a high income area, they find some child care off base and get paid a lot more money. So again, it's Camp Pendleton, Hawaii, and Quantico, and it's about 800 bed spaces. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to give a shout out to the Navy, which seems to have done a great job in some of these issue areas. Let's start with what's called Career Intermission Program. At least that's what the Navy calls it. Do each of you have one of those that gives your service members up to 3 years to take a sabbatical?
Madam
General
Chairman,
Seaman?
the Army does have a program. We have about 40 people in the program, officer enlisted.
And how long?
It varies. In some cases, it's a year. It's up to the service member in terms of how long they want to go. Some it's up to 3 years. In fact, one of the members went off to get their law degree and took the full 3 years. So it varies. Another member went off to get a scuba license to be a scuba instructor at some point. So it depends on how long they want. It could be up to 3 years. I can get you more granularity.
Is that automatic?
It is what we've approved all the requests that have come in for the amount of time the soldiers have asked.
All right. And Admiral Burke, you have one, right?
Yes, ma'am. We've had 217 sailors use it. We've had right around 125, 130 or so sailors come full circle, complete their intermission. About 90 of those came up on a subsequent reenlistment. They reenlisted. A lot of sailors tell us they would not have stayed in or been able to reenlist had they not had that opportunity to take that sabbatical and achieve the life-work balance objectives that they were after.
General Kelly?
Yes, ma'am. We have the same program. We have been in year 4 now of that program. We've have over 200 members who have entered in the program. Some have come back full circle, as Admiral Burke said. We interviewed 6 of those folks who came back this last year. All have decided, based on their SIP experience, to stay with and make a decision to stay and retain with the Air Force. Our program's about 56% female and about 44% male right now.
All right. General Rocco?
Yes, ma'am. We have 11 people in the program. We've had 4 that completed the program, 2 that came back into the Marine Corps, and 2 that went to an inter-service transfer.
Okay, we have a high percentage of unintended pregnancies in the military. The Navy has a very good program in terms of providing information on contraception, particularly long-term contraception. I'm curious if the other services have a similar program. General Siemens?
Chairwoman, I'll have to take that for the record. I'm not sure.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add on that, Admiral Burke?
We started during life skills course. That's the first thing that all our sailors go to right after boot camp, and kind of give them an education on everything to do with pregnancy and parenthood, and impacts on careers and other things like that. And then we reinforce it continually throughout the career points. I think that's about it, ma'am.
Okay. General Kelly?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, we have programs for basic education, at basic training and initial skills training. I'll get you specifics on how those work. I can tell you that we also put in place a program that allowed the pregnant airmen to make a decision, defer a decision until after they had a chance to talk to mentors, talk to others who had been in there, understood the resources that were available. We did that with an eye towards retention, and we've seen some improvements in retention where we used to force them to make the decision prior to the delivery of the child. Now we have up to a year after that to make the decision.
All right. General Wilco?
I'm sorry, there we go. The education starts at boot camp. We have, it's something that they can elect to attend and get educated or get some training and some classes at boot camp.
All right. I encourage you all to look at the Navy's program because they have a much lower rate of unintended pregnancies. Finally, do any of you provide in vitro services?
Madam Chair, I believe we do, but I'll take that for the record
right.
to confirm.
Admiral Burke?
I don't believe that we do.
Yeah, I'll take it for the record as well. We know of some members who have done it, but I'll have to get the record on the official stats, ma'am.
And ma'am, I'd like to take that for the record.
All right, great. With that, I will offer my ranking member his opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman Spear. You know, I have a continued focus on our Gold Star families and how we best serve those survivors of our Gold Star or of our warriors who die in combat. And I think that's really important overall because we fight best when we know that our family and loved ones are taken care of. So I just ask that you continue to keep that in mind as we go forward. The Department of Defense has an enormous amount of data related to service members, their families, and their backgrounds. how are each of the services, real quickly, leveraging the information to better understand service members' motivations for staying in the military or leaving the military? And start with you, General.
Ranking Member Kelly, thank you for the question. We do have a number of surveys and some data that's out there. I would say one of the top reasons people tend to leave the active and reserve force is civilian opportunities on the outside. At least that's the survey indication we get. With the economy doing what it is, unemployment less than 4%, that there's a significant draw beyond. Having said that, sir, for officer retention and NCO retention, we're at record highs in terms of people continuing to stay.
Sir, we do a number of surveys as well. In addition to the traditional exit surveys, we've developed career milestone surveys for the sailors that are staying in. That's as important as finding out why people are leaving. And then we've also developed command climate-oriented but very targetable surveys that individual commands can tailor quickly and do frequently that we're calling pulse surveys. So there's a number of survey techniques. But most recently, throughout a personnel system transformation and as part of our ongoing Sailor 2025 efforts, we've developed what we're calling fleet integration teams, and they go out and basically hold focus groups with sailors, spouses, family groups. An example, we went out, we took a 2-month period a year ago, went out across the fleet to understand the pain points associated with PCS moves, and we came up with 16 independent solutions, 2 of which we're about to put into motion here very shortly to significantly ease the burdens of making PCS travel moves, and that's how we're, getting the ideas that fuel the Sailor 2025 programs.
And General, I'm gonna stop here. If you guys can provide that for the record, because I want to make sure. But mining of that data and getting the right data is very, very important. And General Kelly, this question will be for you, and then I'll get to you, General. Many of the personnel reforms we've discussed in the past have included plans to increase permeability between the active and reserve components. What are your views on the need for this, and what has been done in the Air Force? And specifically, I want to talk mostly Air Force and Army on this, the permeability between National Guard, Reserve, and active component.
Sir, as you know, our modern use in the military for our reserve components are both our National Guard and Reserve is an operational force, no longer a strategic force. That means the permeability and our ability to manage as a total force has increased tremendously over time. We have several programs where we allow folks to move back and forth. We have a program called the Voluntary Limited Period of Active Duty, where Reserve and Guard members serve on active duty for up to 3 years. We have transition programs. Where I would tell you we fall short and could use help is the ability to move easily between requires appointment sometimes, especially on the officer side, requires reappointment as you move between components. In a modern force, that uses their reserve components in an operational fashion. We would like to see us get to a place where we have an appointment authority that allows us to move much quicker, much easier between those components.
Representative Kelly, I would echo General Kelly's comments. I think the biggest improvement we could do is to make it much easier to transfer back. We talk a lot about continuum of service, and if we want to encourage people to go between the active guard and reserve, we need to make it easier for them and their families.
General Rocco, this is for you. We've repeatedly heard that there are severe shortages on installation child care. In many cases, military spouses are not able to even look for outside employment without meaningful access to child care. What can the Marine Corps do to fix this? Because I want most military spouses, either husbands or wives, sacrifice a career for a job. So they do a job until their spouse retires, and then they're able to maintain their career. So what are we doing to fix this, General Rocco?
Representative Kelly, thank you for that question. So I fully agree. Lack of child care impacts unit readiness, whether it's on the spouse or whether it's on the member who has to worry about their child in an appropriate child development center. So to that point, I would say that we need to help streamline the licensing process. And as I answered Chairwoman Spear's question about the child development, our shortage is not in actual spaces. It's not installation. It's the actual folks that watch the children and the licensing and the requirements. So one, the licensing requirements I think is onerous. Number two, I think when you get to areas, and again, Hawaii Southern California and Quantico, Northern Virginia. Those areas have child development centers outside, obviously, in the civilian market. So we spend a lot of time getting these folks licensed and get their credentials up, and then they immediately find some higher paying jobs out in the civilian market. So we have freedom to pay the market value or the market rate for these folks that are in these high priced areas.
And I want the answers from y'all, if y'all will do those in writing and submit those. And final question, and I want each of you to answer this and do it pretty quickly and succinctly because we've got other people. For each of the services, what would the requested in-strength increases in FY20 be used for? And what increases to in-strength do you anticipate needing in the next 5 years? And I'll start with you, General.
Representative Kelly, thank you very much. We anticipate 2 years measured growth of quality sessions to grow the force, primarily initially to fill the formations, to make sure they're ready to go, and beyond that to build structure.
Yes, sir. Our in-strength is all to do with force structure improvements. So 7,500 this year, and then it's a rough 5,000 increase per year out across the FIDP. And that'll take us from our present 288 ships out to 314, which is in the FY20 plan.
Our growth for this year is 4,400 for the military, 3,700 active duty, 700 in the reserve components. It is a combination of continuing to improve our readiness and resiliency and increasing capacity and capability to include, as I mentioned in the opening statement, adding maintainers ahead of time and operators ahead of time, anticipating the force structure growth for KC-46, F-35, and B-21.
General.
And the Marine Corps' growth is modest. It's 400 over the FIDP, 100 this year, and 300 through the rest of the FIDP, and it has to do specifically with providing special operations critical skill enablers, so ready men logisticians.
And just one comment. You guys, Hawaii and the other places, we have joint bases at most of those things, and I can't believe that we have you four guys get together and let's jointly fix this child care problem. It's not an Army problem. It's not a Navy problem. It's not a Marine Corps problem. Let's fix it together. And with that, I yield back, Chairwoman.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Luria, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for being here today. I'm going to focus in on one service and one particular aspect of that service. So I recently reviewed the fiscal year 2020 Navy Active Duty Aviation Commander Command Screening Board results, and one statistic jumped out at me. The selection rate for women to Commander Command was 3.8%. Or 7 out of 146 who were selected. Another way to say that is that 96.2% of all aviators selected for command in that year group were men. Additionally, only one woman of color was selected for command, and then when you look at the aviation major command results, they were even more stark. Only 1.8% of those selected were women, and 0 were women of color. It also doesn't appear within those selection board results, from what I could tell, that any VFA or VAQ selectees, so fighter aircraft selectees, were women. Admiral Burke, I was wondering if you could comment why the aviation command selection rate for women was and continues to be so low.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Lurie, for that question. I'd start by saying that our enlisted population is
I just would like to focus on women and officers. Thank you.
Okay, our enlisted population is more racially diverse than our nation. Our officer population in general is not, and our aviation community in particular tends to be less diverse.
Is that a session point, a commissioning, or are you talking about over?
And as we have recruited throughout the years, our diversity numbers have improved across the board in every community. But what you're seeing right now, especially at the command and major command selection boards, are the result of what we were recruiting 20 or 25 years ago, depending on what your board you're talking about.
This was year group 05, so 14 years ago. And the Combat Exclusion Act was lifted in 1994. So women have, for much longer than that, 10 years since then, had the opportunity to serve their careers since the beginning of their career in combatant roles, much like I did in surface warfare. So if we've 10 years past lifting the Combat Exclusion Act, and then those women have had the same opportunities across the course of their career, how are we at the point that only 3.8% of, this is just one community, one year group, were selected for commander command, and 1.8% for major command?
Again, it's a law of small numbers. We have to improve in this area. It's an absolutely critical area. because diversity obviously makes us stronger. It gives us better answers, better solutions. But here's where the issue is. You know, we look very hard at the promotion boards. We look very hard at what we're recruiting, bringing in the front door, and our efforts to do that. And I could talk to you about that. But the area we haven't done well enough on is what goes on in between those boards, and that's a retention factor. What's the environment that's driving women to leave so that they're not around to be able to promote to that
Can I pause
command
there?
opportunity or be selected for
We're
it?
limited on time, so I'd like to pause, and I would like the 5 of you to look across the table at each other.
Same phenomenon, though. How many
And
do we
there's similar-
retain to be eligible? That's the point, ma'am.
So, you know, no one
We
in the
have to
role
ra-
as commander
we have to
of Navy
manage-
Personnel
we have
Command
to
has
manage
ever
that
been
talent.
a woman. So I'd like to focus on that. So in the 04 to 06 year group, which is the year group in this one particular command screening board, there were 13.6 women assessed. So I agree with you that the problem is retention. And what percentage of officers do you plan to commission this year are women?
Roughly 25%.
So 25% as women. So that is an improvement, but, you know, really statistically seems to be quite a jump, because if I look at the numbers between, I had the numbers here, but basically between 2000, in 2000 it was 14.7%, and in 2016 it was 18%. So in the course of 16 years, we only jumped approximately 3.3%.
That's
so
total
we've had,
inventory. Yeah, our sessions for the last 4 years have averaged at right around 25% women.
okay, and is that reflected in all commissioning sources, the Naval Academy as well as ROTC and OCS?
It is.
Okay. So, you know, you mentioned a couple times that you've been given additional authorities through last year's NDAA to improve with retention. And are those things that you're specifically analyzing and focusing on with women, and also women's input throughout their service across the career milestone gates as to how you can use those tools effectively?
Absolutely. We have to create career paths that that all, you know, candidates, women and men alike, can see themselves both growing professionally and personally, and they got to meet their life goals as well as their career goals. So, you know, the ability to have some life-work balance, the ability to start and raise a family, if that's a goal, whether you're a man or a woman, that has to be part of the formula. And DOTMA, as it was before the FY19 NDAA, really pressurized career paths, especially in our aviation community and especially in the 2 communities you singled out earlier, our TAC Air communities. If you didn't go immediately into an aviation production job, you wouldn't meet the next milestone, you wouldn't meet the next statutory promotion opportunity. So the flexibilities you've given us, the opportunity to opt out of promotion, the opportunity to build up-and-state career paths, those are very specific examples of where we're building those pieces in to give places to do something different, achieve that life-work balance, and then come back and get back on the treadmill without penalty to that upward mobility, whether it's
So have
command
any
or...
of the-
Excuse me, gentlewoman's time has expired.
Thank you.
Ms. Escobar is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To all of our panelists, thank you so much for your service. Thank you for being here. General Siemens, it's good to see you again. I really appreciated our time together in the office yesterday and you answering some of my questions during our meeting. I wanted to follow up on something that we discussed regarding making sure that spouses have opportunities for employment in the communities where they are living in. And one of the things I shared with you was not just the licensing issue, but hopefully one of the things we look at changing is making sure that we standardize or we create like a uniform standard for folks so that they don't have to worry about state-by-state standards. So that's something definitely that we can work on. But I am very curious about how we can help military spouses who have professional careers, who are less able to adapt to frequent moves. Are there strategies that you all have thought of and are putting into place for that group of spouses?
Ma'am, thanks for the question. Yes, we have. One of the things we do, the Secretary and the Chief have said we need to get away from conventional wisdom. In other words, you have to move on a certain rotational basis. So they've instructed us to tell an officer If you are someplace, say Fort Hood, your spouse is happy, your family's happy, and you're going off to a professional military education, to give you the opportunity to come back. 5 years ago, that wouldn't have happened. And what that allows is stability for the family to stay in place, to build a little financial wealth if they live off post, and to provide stability for the spouse and the soldiers. The authority to reimburse them for the licensing, I think, is going to be a big deal. The Secretary is also approaching the overseas spouse, which is probably one of the most underemployed segments of our population, trying to make sure they have an opportunity for employment as their soldiers deploy overseas.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Could the other service leaders weigh in as well if there are other strategies that you all have seen that might be workable or that are in the pipeline?
On the overseas point, ma'am, I agree with everything that General Siemens said, but specifically, I know all three service secretaries just signed a memorandum of agreement to go after that specific issue, and you know, it involves starting simple. There's some internal barriers that we can remove, like the ability to run a home business and on-base housing, the ability to run a business out of your APO or FPO mailbox, things of that nature. And then the corporate world can help us as well. Similar to the programs that we run in CONUS with OSD's help, the Fortune 500 companies that participate with preferential spouse hiring for military contractors, and then actually provide them portable careers that tend to move base to base. There's some opportunities in not all, but many of the overseas locations, so expanding that portfolio. That's where we're starting, but room to maneuver from there.
Ma'am, can I jump in here as far as DOD and what we're doing in that area? We have the Military Spouses Employment Partnership, which works with 390 partner employers out there. About 134,000 have been hired since 2011. So we have some programs out there that are helping the services.
Yes, ma'am. So for the Marine Corps, and granted, we are the smallest service, so our problems pale in comparison to the larger services. But we have, from assignment policy, which I run in my building, we have monitors to represent every occupational field. And a Marine never gets orders unless they've spoken to their monitor and said, okay, here's what we're doing and where we're doing it. And we don't just move Marines to move them. We move them based on their promotion, there's a school, or they have command. And we always take into account if the spousal employment. We just recently a senior officer, and if we can't come to an agreement, a mutual agreement, then it comes up to my level to see how do we adjudicate it. We recently had a senior officer whose spouse is a certified medical professional in Southern California. Very limited on where she can practice. So we're able to find a place where he can both be assignable and still continue to be, well, be a Marine and not harm his career, and provide her the ability to transition. So again, it's on a personal level that we deal with trying to find an agreement that works both for the Marine Corps and the couple.
Thank you so much. And I just want to jump in. I'm running out of time. I just want to echo the concerns by my colleague who spoke prior to me on diversity. And my concern also is diversity, not just for women, but for all people of color in that upper echelon. It's hard to recruit diverse people if they think there's no place for them to move upward. So I just want to echo those concerns. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Gentlewoman yields back. Mr. Cisneros is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. I'm actually going to touch on diversity. You know, Mr. Stewart, in your written testimony, you mentioned the efforts of the services are undertaking to promote diversity and inclusion, but you also mentioned in your written testimony that there's no particular program, no goals to recruit to women or minorities. So how can we expect these demographics to be properly represented, and particularly in our officer corps, which are greatly underrepresented between, you know, women and minorities? If we're not setting goals, how can we expect to recruit to these communities and increase their population?
Well, sir, we certainly don't want to go ahead and set quotas, but we definitely want to go ahead and make sure that we're reflecting the nation as a whole. And so, particularly in the area of diversity, I know you had a question, in fact, sent a letter, which we're going to go back to you on, as far as what we're doing in this area, particularly in the military leadership area. at the senior ranks. We have a Military Leadership Diversity Commission, which basically was in the NDAA 2009, which we're basically going ahead and moving out on. I have an actual office that works those kinds of issues, and it's the Force Resiliency Shop and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I have a Dr. Allison Green Sands, who actually is working on that very issue as we speak. Before I came over here, I made sure that we checked on the progress of your letter to the Secretary, and we're working that, and we're going to get an answer back to you, sir.
All right, appreciate that.
Sir, if I could add in, there's two things to that discussion on goals, right? So I'm with Mr. Stewart. We don't have quotas, but we've set goals for applicant pool goals for the United States Air Force Academy for our ROTC programs. And I'll tell you that this year, so our applicant pool goal, to get an applicant pool goal for female applicants at the Academy was 30%. We've achieved that for the first time this year for our class of 22. We're at 28% for our ROTC program. The other thing that we've done is internal is once you get them in the door, how do you retain them, move them up the chain? For all of our key slates for jobs such as general officer aides, general officer executives, key front office jobs, every slate that we produce in those environments today has to have both gender and broader diversity candidates on each slate, and that's improved those numbers from about 18 to 22% across the board.
Do we have programs in the other services?
Sir, yes, if I could add to that, we have similar as what Air Force said. We set targets for gender recruiting, for gender and other areas. But more importantly, what we do is focus our efforts to make sure that we're in the right places, that we're accessible to folks, that we don't intentionally alienate groups when we're sending the message of what the Navy can do for individuals or what they can do for us, and that we don't overlook any source of talent. And then once folks are in terms of retention, it really is the key. It's the management of small numbers, and we put a renewed focus on managing at the very junior level so that you have those folks available to promote up to senior levels. We've got a number of focus groups that continue to work. We've set a Navy-wide high-leverage outcome goal of eliminating unconscious bias. We've looked hard at our promotion systems, who's eligible and who gets promoted. We think those are working right, but what's happening is who leaves in between those promotion boards, command screening opportunities and things like that. Is our culture driving them out? And there are human unconscious biases that drive that. And this high leverage outcome is getting at that. Engineering processes that overcome those unconscious biases. And then we have an inclusion and diversity impact plan that goes with our culture of excellence that is going to reinforce this all down to the deck plates. And I'm happy to talk to you more about that when we have more time, sir.
All right.
It really starts at the session, sir. So for on our listed side, what we're doing is attacking 22 cities that we not give as much attention to in the past, which will bring a lot more diversity into the force. On the officer side, sir, it starts as we bring people to West Point, ROTC, and OCS. This week, sir, the United States Military Academy will graduate 34 African-American female cadets to become second lieutenants, highest number ever. It'll be the highest number of female Hispanic officers being commissioned, and we will commission the 5,000th female to graduate from West Point since they started accepting females. So it starts at that point, and it requires care and nurturing as you go up to make sure they get the right assignments, so you have a broad bench to pick up for flag officers later on.
And, sir, in the Marine Corps, as I stated before, in 18 we assessed over 10% female, and this year we're in the same trajectory. On every promotion board, there is a female, there's representative female, and there's also an officer of color, a diverse officer. We also, by MOS, so we don't help one particular MOS over another. And we also included unconscious bias training in all our schools.
All right. My time's expired. Thank you very much.
Gentleman yields back. Congresswoman Davis is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for your dedicated service. I wanted to just pick up on the what we call child care issue, and just thinking about what I would call child development educators. They don't really just watch kids. They educate them. And whether and sir, turning to you, Lieutenant General Rocco, at Pendleton as an example, where you have higher pay for a number of the educators in the area. Do you know generally what that gap is? Because you talked about the need, the freedom really to pay higher salaries there. Any sense of that, what that gap is?
Ma'am, I don't know what the gap is, but I can certainly come back to you on that. And just and I fully agree with you. My mischaracterization of it. I have 2 grandchildren who are being educated and being or in the child development system. So I've got a personal reason to make sure this is done right. But we'll certainly get back to you on the numbers as far as.
So is it an authority that they're looking for? To do that? Is that across the board that people would have to have authorities, or just in particular areas? Do we need to write something specific?
I think it's a matter of, because of how they're paid a certain salary, and that salary, whether you're in Camp Pendleton, 29 Palms, or wherever you may be, because it's the government work, it is one salary. And of course, you go to the high-income areas where it may work in, say, the Midwest. It doesn't necessarily work in high-income areas like Hawaii or Southern California, and certainly Northern Virginia, where they can get a much larger salary to work out in the civilian market.
Certainly, right. I understand that, because I think what happens, and I may be not necessarily fully correct about this, but at Pendleton and some of the other bases in San Diego that I'm familiar with, often we do have spouses who develop their own businesses in their home, basically. And so they're kind of paid outside of that system.
Very well, and I'm sure that is that exactly. But just from a base, and again from Quantico, where I'm stationed at, it's a very good system. They're very flexible in children and who they take and when they take and their hours. But it comes down to they can work in Arlington, or they can move up further north, closer to the capital, and get paid more money than we can pay them down at Quantico.
Okay,
Congresswoman, can I help them out a little bit on that? Within the military, community, and family policy area within the Department of Defense, we're addressing salary, benefits, and other initiatives with Joint Service Compensation Working Group that we're currently working on right now. This is an area that's been identified, and we basically have the same problem with all the services. And so this is at the OSD level that we're trying to help them out with that, ma'am.
All right, thank you. And I know the standards are great. People are very pleased with that. But perhaps there are some alternatives to helping a number of the women or men, for that matter, establishing businesses that might comply and be able to create some of those within the community. So that would be good to take a look at. I also wanted to just for a minute talk a little bit about bonuses for retention and sort of understanding whether they're necessarily competing with equivalent civilian salaries or whether there are some incentives that would be more salient, more critical to families that would be desirable and perhaps you're doing some of those. Obviously, the Navy is doing some about career intermissions. I was really happy to hear you talk about that because, we worked hard on that, trying to make people understand how important that was for quality of life. I spoke to so many women who left the service as a result of that. So I'm glad to know that you're working on it. But what about that? I mean, are we trying to equate higher salaries and maybe not looking at other kind of bonuses, other kind of benefits that would be helpful?
Congresswoman, I'll start. So when we look at our bonus structures, very rarely are we trying to compete 100% with the civilian salaries. It's really difficult, and I'll give you the aviation example we brought up before about we can't compete with those folks. What we do with those monetary bonuses is just sort of offset the discussion and help tilt the equation in our favor. What we really focus on is those other incentives like you just talked to. Are there other quality of life things you can do? We've almost done like a sort of USAA model, if you will, where we try to person by person find out what is your incentive, what is your discussion. Is it staying longer at the place you're at? Is it PCSing to a certain base? Is it deciding that you want to stay through your child's high school years? We try to almost tailor person by person to work on the retention piece. With the monetary piece, it's just offsetting, but we do not try to compete with the civil sector on that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I was going to ask about the blended retirement systems and the fact that we see a difference really in the higher or lower rates of active duty and reserves, and perhaps for another time you would be able to kind of address that issue. Thank you very much.
The gentlewoman yields back. Maybe you can provide that information to us for the record. Next, Ms. Holland is recognized for 5 minutes. Oh, well, we were doing it based on who came up, but in fairness, yes, Mr. Bergman is recognized for 5 minutes. I apologize, Ms. Holland.
You want me to yield the 5 to her and I'll get it back? All right. I'll take 6 back, give 5. Government math. Okay, thanks for being here, everybody, and thanks, Madam Chairwoman, for the chance to ask a couple questions. Number one, each of the services, you got first-termers. What is the percentage of your first-termers that you hope to retain for a second enlistment and then therefore potentially towards a career of 20? Any rough numbers for each service? I think in the Marine Corps it used to be somewhere around 25% or somewhere between 25 and 30% was our first term.
For the Army, all the services have a pyramid. For the Army, it's higher than that. It's probably about 50 or 60% we would like to stay. Retention rate is about 80% of those people who are fully qualified are staying between 80 and 90%.
So really, when someone comes in, you hope that you'll get a minimum of 50 to 60% to stay for 20?
Not for 20, sir. But about 20% will stay all the way to 20. But
okay,
as they go up.
So you build that career force, if you will, out of 20% of those who come in the door.
Roughly, yes, sir.
Okay, fair enough. Navy?
Yeah, first term retention, so our contracts tend to run a little longer, so that's a 6-year contract. To the second 6-year contract, we when we're at a stable size, we need roughly around 55% retention to that second contract. Okay. Right now, we need much higher than that because we're trying to balance accessions versus retention, because we don't want a really junior force manning that 355-ship Navy. We want a mix of experienced people. So we need in the 70 to 80% region, and we're in that ballpark right now.
Okay, Air Force.
Yes, sir. So similar to the Navy, we use 6-year enlistments as our predominant method. And when they come in, we're looking for somewhere between 60 and 75% of those 6-year enlistments to take a second enlistment. The numbers that we're looking to get to 20 years, similar to the Army, we're looking for about 23 to 25% to get to 20 years on our enlisted force as they go forward. And what I would tell you is right now, our enlisted, if I look across all of our specialties as a whole, 90% of our enlisted specialties are retaining at or above the levels that they were in the previous year, so we're in pretty good shape right now.
Okay, thank you. We all know, you hear the numbers, roughly 70% of the age-eligible men and women who we would try to enlist can't. Largely, obesity is a big problem. What, if anything, are you as the services doing to help those who may walk in your recruiting center overweight to get them so they can successfully complete boot camp?
I'll take this one to start, if you guys don't mind. We took a holistic look at all the medical accession standards, and those that the Department of the Navy had flexibility in, we worked with our Bureau of Medicine to take a fresh look at through the lens of modern medicine. Things like ADHD, hearing loss that could be corrected with hearing aids, eczema, stuff like that. We used to just immediately turn.
I guess I really want to focus on the obesity.
But the same thing with the weight issue. So we started putting people in physical training programs.
So like a delayed entry program, get them into shape.
And then we started running the entrance exam at the beginning of boot camp.
Okay.
And sir, I think you know in the Marine Corps we have the DEP, the delayed entry program, and we just get them on a treadmill with PT them.
Ours.
Really, we do that? But it's okay. I mean, we because each service has a different mission, and we need different, levels of capability in our service members to complete our mission. But we know it is a national problem of obesity, and I know that you all can set the standards for the entire nation for our especially our 18 to 24-year-olds. I'd like to, for the record, take it. You don't have to answer me now, but the cost per individual from the day they walk in the door, or let's say that you allocate, if you picture your advertising dollars and your recruiting, the cost per individual to get them through boot camp. And just if you could, take that for the record, I'd appreciate to see what that cost is. And thanks, Madam Chairwoman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Along the same lines, I think it would be helpful to the committee if each of the services could provide us with the reasons why those who attempt to enlist are declined the opportunity. It would be helpful for us over the long run. Now Ms. Holland is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us this afternoon. I appreciate your service to our country, and thank you so much. I hope I'm not repeating any questions because I came in a little late, but we'll try. Maybe this question would be best answered by Lieutenant General Kelly. How do you envision we can better use our Air Guard to solve our current pilot shortage?
Thank you for that question. As I mentioned earlier, but I'll go again, we use our reserve components as operational reserve. So when we deploy our forces, it's quite often almost impossible for you to tell whether it's an active duty member, a reserve member, or a Guard member. They are completely interchangeable for us, and we utilize them in that fashion. We find, though, in this pilot retention problem where we're at, that we have shortages across all three components. And so while we were able to sometimes, substitute active duty shortages with the Guard, we find similar shortages in our full-time, in particular full-time pilots in the Guard and Reserve. And so the problem for us goes across all three components in that case.
Anyone else like to take that question?
Ma'am, we're able to do similar with everything except for our TAC Air that deploys on aircraft carriers just because of the operating model and the deployment cycles, the train as a unit, deploy as a unit, and remain ready as a unit to surge deploy. But with other types of aircraft that deploys detachments, we actively integrate our reserve components. So helos, patrol aircraft, transports, so on and so forth.
Thank you. Thank you. I was just thinking, I was recently, I gave the commencement speech at the Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute. It's kind of it's a tribal college, but it's a community college in Albuquerque. And the JROTC who did the color guard, they were all Native girls, an all Native girl color guard, which you don't see often. I'm just wondering, what's the percentage of JROTC students who eventually enlist, and is like reaching high school students a viable way of ensuring that diversity and the female population has an equal chance at a career in the military?
From an OSD perspective, we'll take that for the record to go ahead and get back to you on those numbers. I'll let the services talk about specifically their junior OTCs, but overall, we'll try to get back to you with that, ma'am.
Okay.
Within the Army, ma'am, we own about half of the Department of Defense junior ROTC programs, great citizenship programs. Even if they don't come into uniform, the leadership they learn, the skills, the values, the discipline, I think pay off in life later on. A number of them do come in, not all to the Army, they come into other services as well. But we're very proud of our junior ROTC programs. We think they make a great contribution to our nation.
I would echo General Siemens, same for the Navy.
Okay.
Yeah, I would echo as well, ma'am, but then I would also add that there's other organizations for us besides the junior ROTC where we focus to try and increase our female sessions, and in fact, we looked at areas like BEA, the Black Engineer Year Societies. We have partnerships with the robotics, with E-League, with GoPro, a bunch of other folks where we can do some partnerships to try and make sure that we increase the interest and the opportunity for them to know about the Air Force.
Excellent.
Ma'am, I think it's just a wonderful program. And we can get back to you with the numbers, at least from the Marine Corps, what we get. But it's programs like that that encourage folks to serve.
Because really, when I think about the opportunities in our Native American community, sometimes the unemployment rate is as high as 50 or 60%, and that it just seems that those are opportunities that we could increase in those areas. And along those lines, Lieutenant General Siemens, with 79% of new recruits having a relative who served, what efforts are being made to appeal to new recruits outside of that demographic?
Thank you for the question. A lot of our recruits come from kind of a southern smile from the D.C. area all the way down Florida, Georgia, into Texas. So we're expanding beyond that range. We've identified 22 cities, big cities, Pittsburgh, Seattle, other places that we may have neglected a little bit in the past where we think we can reach into some diversity across our nation. We really want our Army to look like our nation, and we can't do that unless we tap into all the right places to bring in applicants to become soldiers.
Thank you so much. Madam Chair, I'll yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. There's been a request for a second round, so we're going to engage in that. Let me just say at the outset to all of you and to Mr. Stewart that one of the areas that is oftentimes overlooked is girls' high schools in terms of recruitment, and I think that would be a good area for you to pursue as well. Mr. Kelly.
And I'm not going to take long, but I have a unique situation. We're having our first Mississippi National Guard armor officer who's a female, was commissioned last weekend, and I got to meet a very, very great young lady. But we have a policy, it's either DOD or Department of the Army, which requires that she have another female officer with her in order to serve, okay? And so we got to be careful with policies that segregate, and we got to integrate, okay? And what that means is she doesn't need to be an HHC. What she needs is to be commanding a tank platoon with whoever's in that tank platoon. And so we have to be real careful that we, because that's a leadership deal. We got to make sure we keep folks in line, they treat them right, but we can't segregate for the purpose of integrating because it does not work. We've got to make sure we give them the opportunity to perform as a tank platoon leader, whether they're female or male or anything else. So I just ask that we look at that, to be careful not to try to help and hurt by trying to help, okay? And with that, I yield back, Chairwoman.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Lurio, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you. I'd like to continue along the line of questioning from earlier. So across the country, women make up about 56% of all college attendees. And since one of the primary factors in receiving a commission is a degree, I was curious as to why currently in the Navy, and I would like to hear from the other services, the previous question I asked your current accessions and people that you'll be commissioning this year, why is that percentage only half of the current population? And General Kelly, you might have alluded to it some as well when you mentioned the Air Force Academy application pool, you're getting about 30% of applicants. So is it a question of the number of people applying and presenting themselves to, be members of the military and be commissioned as officers, or is it somewhat goals that are being set or capped by the academies and other commissioning sources?
Yeah, Congresswoman, thanks again for the follow-on question. I'll just clarify where I was before. Our program has been focused on increasing our applicant pool goal, right? So we've had to go out and do targeted efforts, do targeted engagements to increase that applicant pool goal. So our initial step was to get the applicant pool goal above 30% at the Academy and ROTC. Once we get there, our goal is to continue to move that north, right? We'd like to get that up to be representative of the population.
With 30% applicants, this, assuming that's the incoming class, what percentage acceptance-wise are actually going to be attending the Air Force Academy this summer?
So we believe the class of 2022 will be close to the 30% applicant pool goal that we reached.
We said applicant pool goal. I mean, we're at the point now where we've offered appointments. What is the actual class composition?
We believe it'll be 30%, which will be up from, in the past, it's been about 25%. So we've moved it up about 5%.
Okay. And Admiral Burke for the Naval Academy?
I'd have to get back to you on the applicants versus selectees. I could tell you what we graduate, and that's what we...
So you don't know the statistics for the incoming class?
I don't know how many applicants we seek versus how many we select.
Well, I'd like that information as a follow-up.
I'll get that for you.
And General Siemens for West Point?
Yes, ma'am. I'll confirm the exact numbers, but it's between 23 and 25%.
Okay. Thank you. And I'd like to go back to Admiral Burke because, we talk about both accession, recruitment, but we also have talked a lot about retention and how those numbers have dwindled off significantly. The example I gave about one community's screening board was at approximately the 15-year commission service date. But within the Navy overall, female officer retention is the lowest of all of the services, yet male officer retention is higher than other services. Can you comment on that discrepancy? With any of the programs we had the opportunity to speak about in my office yesterday, how are you targeting those specific programs to fix these problems? And just before you answer, I'd like to comment as well on the fact that, when we talked about issues here about what are your policies and training on birth control, no one was familiar with that at the table. IVF services, none of you know whether active duty military have access to IVF services. That's somewhat surprising because that's important to a female service member who has fertility issues. And so these are just things that I'm just trying to elevate, that these are important to female sailors. And I was a female commanding officer of female sailors, and these are things that came up over the course of my career when these women worked for me. So to go back to my question, Admiral Burke, can you talk a little bit about the programs that we mentioned yesterday and how you plan to target those to the demographic to increase, both diversity and, retention of women over the course of their career?
Absolutely. Thank you. Again, we have to do better here and make it so that folks can see a path not only for the professional career but for their personal goals as well. So we talked about the career intermission program, but the parental leave latitude that was given to us in FY17 NDAA, I believe it was, and how we're implementing that has been a tool. We talked about child care. We've expanded the hours and the capacity.
Can we stop on that? Because there was a study in the Virginian Pilot, our local paper, obviously Norfolk Naval Station, the largest naval station in the country, that for overnight child care, because many Navy service members have to stand duty overnight, and for single parents or dual military parents where one parent is deployed, there are only 24 spots for overnight child care within the Hampton Roads region. That seems like an unacceptable amount to meet the demand, and I'll further carry on. I noticed, and I'll follow up with Langley Air Force Base, which is also in my district, about the need there. But for the Navy, you said that you're approximately 8,000 or so spots short for child care. I just looked at a U.S. Naval Institute report that the most current reporting as of last week shows that we're at 9,298 spots short within the Navy. So you need to increase your child care capacity by 24%. And that's only in places where there are child care facilities that have waiting lists. In my district, for example, Wallops Island is a remote area that has a Navy facility and has no child care facility at all. So every time I have a town hall on the eastern shore of Virginia, myself and Senator Warner were there a few weeks ago, we have service members show up and talk about the fact that there is absolutely no child care available, not only on base, but not even within the adjacent community. So I'm just, putting this out there as far as, identifying the scope of the need.
Absolutely. And to your point, we have 35,000 children capacity with our intrinsic, Navy government sources. We're outsourcing the rest of them, some to certified home providers, some to, community commercial providers. One thing that we have launched here, Commander of Navy Installations Command Vice Admiral Mary Jackson's leading this effort, is requests for information about the feasibility of partnering with community commercial businesses to increase both the facilities as well as the capacity of child care. And that would be a good opportunity for a location like Wallops Island. So
let me just underscore what you've heard from virtually everyone on this panel, and something I heard everywhere I went. It didn't matter if it was the Army, the Air Force, the Marines. It didn't matter. Child care is a huge problem on every one of our bases. And I think what needs to happen is a comprehensive look at what the need is, and then immediate steps taken to either start building the facilities or finding the opportunities for these families to get quality child care. I will also point out that many of the child care opportunities that service families have to access off base are more expensive, and they are only being subsidized to what the rate is on base, so they are doubly impacted by it. Ms. Davis, do you have any further questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to just return very quickly. I echo that as well, obviously. I think that we need to think out of the box about this. There are some options that I don't think have been tried, so perhaps we can take a look at those as well, and really developing the personnel in the communities. I wanted to talk just a minute about the blended retirement system, because we know that there's a difference. The Marine Corps, for example, had the highest rates among active duty and reserves in opting in, whereas the Army had the lowest rates of adoption. So just trying to understand, perhaps from Mr. Stewart and from the services, if detailed analyses have been performed as to the origin of those differences and how those findings can inform the retention of talent among our all-volunteer force.
So as far as the data, ma'am, we're not there yet. Again, the blended retirement system, as you know, is new, but we are tracking it, and we will provide you data associated with it on the take rates the reasons why, all the details associated with that, because we know Congress is very, very concerned about the blended retirement system.
Great. Anybody else want to?
Man, for the Army, on the reserve component, and this, I have no survey data other than me going out and asking people why they did or didn't participate. On the reserve side, what they told me is if they have a civilian job, their 401k is capped. In other words, they have a good program in the civilian world. This would not necessarily enhance them by going to the blended retirement. On the active side, two things we got back in terms of feedback. One was a lot of the soldiers intend to stay for until 20 years, so why would they go for 40 when they intended to stay for 50? The second issue was for those people intended to get out, you can't access your blended retirement until 59 and a half without a penalty. So they were investing themselves for things knowing they would get out at year 10 and want to buy a house, start a business and things like that, as opposed to having a deferred compensation package. That was the feedback we got.
Yeah, for the Navy, we had a very robust, financial education campaign around this, as did all the services. But with a largely career-oriented force, folks looked at the numbers and realized if you hadn't been contributing really from day one, depending on your assumptions about market values and things like that, you may not be able to break even if you made the switch. So we had a relatively low number of active component folks that were in the decision window switch over, but that was the driving reason. It was the running the numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, I would echo what my colleagues have already said, ma'am. And so our numbers for the active force were about 29% and far less on the reserve components. But the active force, I would say, a lot more career-minded folks who are thinking about 20 years as a career. You heard us talk about our retention goals being very high for an Air Force that's technically oriented. So we weren't overly surprised by the opt-in rates for those folks, but the discussion of 50% versus 40%, if you were career-minded, definitely came into play for those folks.
And ma'am, I think for the Marine Corps, because our numbers are so high, we're also opposite of our other services where we have the largest turnover, close to 70% that we don't retain after the first enlistment. So they looked at this as an opportunity to get vested, even for a few years, that they can benefit from.
Right. And would you just say overall that this was a good move to create the opportunity?
Yes, ma'am. If I can,
Yeah.
just my impression is that in the past, whenever an individual spent time with the services, it was thank you very much for your service, and as they headed out the door, they had nothing to show for it.
Okay.
So this package that we have, yes, ma'am.
Okay, great.
Beneficial.
Thank you. And just a question about the higher retention rates, and we've talked about women in the services and whether or not, in fact, culture has something to do with whether or not they stay in and what their experiences have been that have perhaps driven them out prematurely. So I don't know if you want to comment on that. The other thing I would just say is it's my understanding, and when it comes to IVF, that many of our wounded warriors have had the ability to get for those services. And so I was a little surprised as well that, in fact, people in the active duty are not able to access those services. So that would be good to follow up on. Thank you very much. I believe my time is running out. Culture.
21 seconds on
Does
culture.
that run?
I mentioned those high leverage outcomes, and that's exactly what our focus groups are getting at. It's what is it about the culture that they're either seeing or choosing to not see that's driving people's decisions.
And if I may, ma'am, just for the record, the Coast Guard actually did a gender diversity report that we're looking at in OSD. They just recently did it, and we're taking a look at that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much.
Okay. Ms. Davis yields back. All right, gentlemen, you've I think, gotten a good sense of where our issues are. Let me end with two more points. In visiting many of these bases, I found that the spouses were either not aware that their professional license transfer was available to them, and of the ones that did, they said they couldn't get anyone at wherever they're supposed to contact them in order to get it processed. So we have an issue there. I also think it should be increased to up to $1,000, and we will attempt to address that in the NDAA. But the other thing that they said, and I think it's a thorny issue, and I would love to have you think about it and then provide us a written response to, is that when many of these spouses go out to get employment, they are discriminated against because they can detect from their resume that they're a military family member, and so there's a reluctance to hire them. So it's a huge problem. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I would certainly appreciate your comments on that. And then finally, housing. The conditions of lead, mold, asbestos that hasn't been addressed is a serious problem. And then the second one is the lack of responsiveness by the housing management firms that we hire to accommodate, a clogged sink, a toilet that doesn't work, and they are totally non-responsive. And we've got to get that fixed because we're paying good money for them to provide those services, and the extent to which they're not is very problematic. And one of the things we're considering is whether we need an ombudsman in at each of the bases to be able to provide that kind of service to the families and shake the management firm. So those are my questions, and I want you to give some thought to it and get back to us. Mr. Kelly? Okay. With that, we stand adjourned. Thank you.